Welcome to the Art of Actual Change. I'm your host, Derek Nielsen, former health specialist turned wildlife conservation fine art photographer. Through my travels around the world, I've met some fascinating people doing amazing work to make this planet a better place to live. Each week, I'll be bringing you these people, letting them tell their stories, and hopefully you'll gather information on how you can make a difference and learn the art of actually making a change. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me here at the Art of Actual Change. Today I have two incredible guests, Phil and Gerard. They are starting a travel company, Arctic Tern Expeditions. I met them while I was down in Antarctica as a traveler myself, and I was blown away by both of their not only professionalism, but their wealth of knowledge of Antarctica and beyond. And I'm so excited to bring them to you today. And here they are, both Phil and G. So gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to come on the show here. Tell me a little bit about this Arctic Tern Expedition and how is it different and why did you start it?
Well, G, do you want to go ahead? Take this one.
No, you go first. It's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, Derek, thanks for having us on your podcast. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for inviting Gerard and I. Arctic Tern Expeditions really came to fruition 2 years ago. Although Gerard and I, we've been friends for quite a long time, and we've been working on expedition ships for about 6 years. And through that 6 years or more now, Gerard. Oh, time does flies. Yeah. We've been talking about just kind of the idea of starting off on our own, and in traveling to Antarctica and to the Arctic, we sort of realized that together, the two of us have all the tools that we need to not only create a travel company that caters to small groups and special expeditions, but to really use what we know about our clients to create special experiences within them. Taking time to soak in moments and really immerse yourself in environments that we think are truly life-changing, places that are really hard to get to, but once you're there, you can be so overwhelmed by them that you don't really take in the details and take the time to really sit yourself down and put yourself in that place. And I think that's what we are trying to accomplish, is to offer trips that are different, that are small, and I get to do it with one of my best friends in the world, and that's one of the biggest gifts of my life, is to embark on this with Gerard, and that's really special. It's been special for the last 2 years, and we've been working really hard, especially through this pandemic, to make it happen, and we're making progress. We've got trips coming up in 22, and those trips go to Svalbard and to Morocco, where Gerard will lead a culinary experience, and in Svalbard, both Gerard and I will be leading as polar guides, and we feel like it's just the beginning. So it's exciting for sure.
No, and I think you guys, you will make a great team, and that your friendship shines through. You really do respect each other, and it's going to be really fun to see what you guys come up with. So, G, I've been noticing that it's well known, but you are quite a chef. I accidentally jumped in on one of your previous meetings, and you were cooking through some recipes that my mouth was watering. So, who will be doing the cooking on the ship?
Well, thankfully not me.
Too bad.
I say that with the caveat that the reason that I entered the world of polar exploration and travel was way back in the mid-90s, and you can see from my beard I'm very old, listeners, watchers. But I first started work in the Antarctic about 25 years ago as a chef on a research station, and that really was a great ticket to travel around. And I've done a lot of cooking, not just in the Arctic, but in California and Europe, everywhere really, Arctic as well. But what I really love to do now is get out on the hill. I like to get out of the kitchen. Some of the trips that we will offer, and we are offering, will involve a really rich cultural and food can't think of the right word. Experience. Sorry.
Yeah, the experience.
Yeah. But wherever we go, we'll be sure to get good food wherever we can, however we can. But I think just going back to Phil's point, is that we've shared a cabin now for 6 years on one of the ships we work on, and during that time you get to know someone really well. You get to know each other's faults, quirks,
I'm sure.
troubles, and everything else. But
it goes both ways, by the way, Gerard.
I'm sure.
That's why I said you get to know each other. But I feel within that, if you can survive that kind of experience with someone, you begin to pick out of their experience, their knowledge, really what matters to them. And I think what we've worked out, what we've distilled in our relationship as friends over the years, is really what creates a really good guest experience. It's about giving people more time, giving people more attention. And even on a small ship, 130 passenger ship, which is a small ship in polar regions, you still don't really get enough of that. And so by going really small, we get to do a more intense experience. And as a guide, I want to give people as much as I can of my knowledge, my history, historical knowledge rather, my botanical knowledge about where we're going, and just giving people as rich an experience as you can. And you do get that on some of the expedition ships, but actually by going smaller and creating this new company, Arctic Tern Expeditions, I think we are heading in the right direction. Even more so with the past year, which has been challenging.
Yeah, of course.
I
felt like on the expedition ship where I met you guys, that your crew did a really great job of making it intimate, even though it was a larger ship compared to what you're going to be doing. I can only imagine bringing that down to the next level, how much more of a great experience you guys are going to be able to provide. What size of crew will you be bringing along as staff versus passengers on your trips?
So I can speak to the 2 trips that we have booked in so far. We are working with a ship in Svalbard that will allow for 12 guests, and there will be 7 crew members along with 2 guides. So that'll be 12 guests plus 9, and then we're planning to bring special guests along as well, guests that will be presenters and knowledgeable about the areas that we're going to, and that's another part of the draw for our trips. So it's a crew of a chef and a hotel manager, deckhands, first mates, and captains, and then Gerard and I kind of bobbing along as guides to go with you on your journey. Yeah,
that sounds like an incredibly personal experience for your guests. They're gonna, each one will be a trip of a lifetime. You just keep stacking them on top, and they're gonna fall in love with you guys and want to keep coming back.
Well, I think we've been really aware over the past years working as guides together, and maintaining contacts with our potential guests has been really important. Understanding what works for a potential future guest, and surveying what they want, what they find exciting about working with us, what they want to see, be it in Svalbard or Greenland. Morocco, there'll just be 8 people with me in Morocco next May, which is really exciting because that's a really nice small group. And people tell us they want to go to Bhutan, they want to go to Chiloe, they want to go to Baja, California. And Devon Island, Baffin Island, we've got some really exciting plans. And I think one of the things that we've realized in our work together is that we know some really kick-ass guides.
Yeah.
People that have written the guidebook to, for example, Madagascar, the Seychelles. They've written the guidebook to Baja. They've published their world-class guides. And in part of our business planning, it's really been important for us to look after those people and say, okay, if you can if you can design a trip for us, we have the potential to market that to our guests. We can survey them. We can say, what are your top 3 places to go to, and we can start to put together a trip for them. And it's not a quick process. It takes 2 or 3 years to do all the research, and we've got some wonderful friends doing that, helping us do that now. Ultimately, we'll look after them by making them part of our company, part of our trusted, our circle of friends. And many of the people that have traveled with us in the past will recognize those people. And it's just broadening the circle of trust, really, and the circle of wanting to take people on incredible adventures, be they wildlife or culinary or historical, but actually keeping it personal and not expanding too much.
Will these trips be kind of a la carte based on your guests, or will you have certain destinations that you will return to every year?
Well, that's Phil, if you don't mind,
Please.
I'll take that. One of the reasons that we are working with established guides in specific places is because they can embed that their experience and be there on the ground, so that we effectively collaborate with guides, be that in South Africa or Chiloé, for example, or Svalbard, or Greenland, Devon Island, and they know the place better than we do. So they design the trip, they keep our knowledge fresh on the ground, and then year to year, as things develop, we know that they're always keeping an eye on the details of the place that we're going to. And we're planning always to have one of us on the trip, because let's face it, we love to travel as well.
Sure.
But with someone that really has maintained that contact on the ground with the developments and with the world as it is, keeping on track, keeping in touch with political developments and COVID developments in each country is really important for us to make sure that wherever we go, we keep our guests safe and well looked after.
Of course. So what are some of the things that you're going to be offering on the trip? Because when I took the trip down to Antarctica, there were certain things that you could participate in. Will you be bringing things like, well, I experienced, and actually how I met Phil was a kayaking experience. Will there be certain experiences on your travels that you'll offer to guests? And obviously you probably don't need a kayaking guide in the middle of a South African safari, but will there be certain things that you'll be bringing along to each location that really spice up the trip?
I think those elements are gonna be specific to each trip that we go on. I know that the trips that we go on in Svalbard, for instance, at least with the boat that we're chartering right now, it's a small vessel that has a lot of deck space, and it's something that is really useful as a mobile platform. And I know that you experienced that on the bigger ship that we traveled on together in Antarctica, but this is altogether much more of a mobile kind of craft, and allows us to get vantage points and experiences that we wouldn't necessarily get on larger ships. I think that we can integrate things like kayaking in the future, but right now what we're looking for is a vessel that allows us to have that really intimate small group experience. We'll be able to be more dynamic in how we get on shore and ways in which we're able to operate. We're going to be able to offer, sunrise and sunset cruises, go with the light, if you will. And I say sunrise and sunset, I'm kind of talking more about when the light is more advantageous, because
Sure,
the Arctic,
yeah,
it's 24 hours of daylight, but at least in the summer. But when we go to these places, we're looking for the most advantageous conditions, and I think that's one of the biggest features that we can offer, is going to the places when we know they're going to be at their best, and that's the biggest advantage that I think we'll bring in our trips to Svalbard and in Morocco. I think, Gerard, you can speak to this a bit more, but we're going to be offering cultural experiences, going into the mountains and shopping around in the souks and the markets with a world-class chef, and then taking that stuff home and cooking some excellent cuisine. I think
Sounds
that's going to
fabulous.
be an amazing trip, mouth-wateringly so. But yeah, it's all going to be with this man right here.
That's excellent.
Well, I think just to add to that, if you don't mind, I think
Sure.
the personalized nature of the trip is really the unique selling point of what we're doing. It's guest knowledge, understanding where people want to travel with us in the future as a company, and personalizing the experience. And we were talking to a wonderful guide based in Baffin Island the other day, who's putting together some amazing trips for us, man-hauling trips into the mountains in 3 or 4 of the world's most incredible Arctic sceneries. And, you know, really just our knowledge of our guides' potentials is really exciting. And sometimes, you know, I've been very fortunate to work for many Antarctic research organizations and polar expedition ships, but actually sometimes the frustrating thing is not being able to let your imagination run wild. And that's what we really can do with ATE. We can put our guests in touch with the best guides, and we can let them run with that. And that's really exciting. I think that's probably the most unique thing about running a small company like this.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now, that's actually one of my other questions is, what are some of your biggest frustrations in the travel industry in general? I mean, as people who are passionate about the environment, passionate about the places that you're going, are there any certain things that have popped up that frustrate you in general about the travel industry, things that you may have seen other ships doing in locations, or experiences that you've had while leading guides some other locations?
Well, I'm tempted to say coffee. Because Bill and myself have a shared habit of very good coffee. But Phil, you go ahead. I'll you deal with the serious.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. The coffee on certain ships is subpar. We'll just put it that way.
Okay.
But we do manage to find ways around it, don't we, Gerard? I think frustrations in terms of how other companies approach things. That, you know, one of the really great things about working in a place like Antarctica is that by and large, the majority of the ships operate under something called the IATO. It's a big organization that kind of sets rules for itself, and it's the tourism industry in Antarctica regulating itself. So we all operate with standards and regulations that adhere to, you know, protecting the environment, and that's one of the really great things that I think that the polar industry has done for itself is taking the lead on making sure it creates a standard with which we can all operate safely in Antarctica with respect to the wildlife and to the environments that we work in. And that's something where, you know, all the ships will do certain things like go through biosecurity, and that's been really wonderful to kind of go through and do that from ship to ship. That said, I think as far as frustrations go,
That was one of the big things that I noticed going to Antarctica that was so different than everywhere else that I've traveled to, was the level of, I don't know, kind of precaution that everyone took not to contaminate the mainland, not to make a disturbance, you know, to leave it as you found it, per se. And I just found that very, very, I mean, reassuring to know that this sort of absolutely emotionally beautiful place would be cared for by the people who are going there most often. So I know that you guys are part of that, a huge part of that, and will most likely, and I'm sure you will, but carry that sort of treatment of the earth where you guys are traveling in your own company. So
and I think that's a huge thing is when we go down there as guides, we are really passionate about these areas. You know, we do really care for these environments, and we see the changes that go through in a season. And I know for me, I've only been working in the Antarctic for 7 years. Gerard, much longer, evidenced again by your beard. But I've seen environmental changes happen from the first day I stepped in Antarctica to now. You know, you see glaciers melting, you see rock faces becoming uncovered, you see the changes in different penguin colonies. And, you know, there are questions of, you know, how much does tourism impact these areas? And the industry is slowly doing the research to say, okay, these are the impacts that are happening at certain penguin colonies that are visited very often, and we can kind of take that and react appropriately. And I guess that the issue is reacting appropriately to that. There's a lot of money coming into the industry right now. New ships are being built. I think, you know, the number of expedition ships that are going to the Antarctic is increasing from like 25 ships to 45 ships over a really short span of time.
Wow.
And there's a lot more people coming to the Antarctic now. And the question is, how do we manage that? How do we make sure that the impact is reduced among these Antarctic sites that we can visit? Because there's only a limited number of them. There's only so many penguin colonies in the Western Antarctic Peninsula. There's only so many places that you can go Zodiac cruising on a windy day.
Right.
And when you start filtering more people in a short span of time that is summer in Antarctica, you start running into issues of, you know, are we overcrowding certain areas? And I think when we over the years I've noticed that, and one of the big issues for the industry to answer is, you know, how do we deal with more and more people coming to the Antarctic, and how do we make sure that we limit the impact when they do? And it's not such a frustration for me, but a big question mark moving forward.
Yeah, it's a concern, and it's something that you want to have a part in figuring out the best, you know, whether it's some sort of spreadsheet you lay out and say, you guys go here certain days, and you calculate exactly how much time you're allowed on land and exactly how many ships are going where. And I remember watching Alex, who was our operator in charge of, I forget the name, what's his exact title?
Expedition leader.
Yeah, expedition leader. And I saw that how much time it went into the planning of the trip and the landings and all the different little operations. And it was just fascinating. And that was, as it was in 2019 or 2020, the beginning of it. And if you're saying that it's probably going to double in the next certain amount of years, then the people who are going there are going to have to really cooperate with each other and communicate and make sure that these places, the penguins and, you know, the seals and the whales and all the wildlife can just keep thriving as they've always done. And it's going to be a challenge. And I think you guys really have an uphill battle, but are if any sort of tour groups were doing it, I trust the Antarctic people to figure it out.
And that's exactly right. Oh, go ahead, G.
Yeah. Sorry, no, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. No, I think, Derek, you're right. And what Phil said is very important, that we do collaborate with other organizations, other ships of different sizes. We have regulations of, you know, how many people can go ashore at a certain time, of course, and within certain hours. But I think also there are two other aspects I'd like to mention that I think are important to both of us, which is that as the industry expands, it's not just a case of there are more guests and companies are building more ships. You know, some companies are building, you know, a ship every year, so they have 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. But for me, it's important that guides really understand the minutiae of how to operate safely in polar regions. In the Antarctic, yes, that's a lot of environmental concern on looking out for disturbance of behavior in the penguins and seals, particularly on shore, but also then in the Arctic, it's looking out for the changes in the management of the Arctic for the countries that own places that we go to. And we know there are stresses in places like Svalbard, in Iceland, in Greenland, for you know, increased tourism, and it's a case of balancing you know, our want to take guests to these places, but then understanding the nuances of the environment we're taking people into, be it in a remote community in Svalbard or somewhere in East Greenland, and introducing people to these incredibly fascinating and often beautiful places, but sometimes, particularly in the Arctic, quite challenged places. And I think that's something that, as established guides, we've had chance to embed, understand, and work out how we can best operate safely on an environmental point of view, but also to understand and appreciate the environment and the population we're taking guests into, to be sensitive about that. And I think on a small ship with a small group, we can do that really effectively, because we can be very fleet of foot. Even on a 100-passenger ship, sometimes you just can't turn around an operation as you would like. But on a small ship with 12 passengers, for example, we can be much more flexible in our operation and more sensitive to the environment within which we're working. And I think that's what really attracts us both to that, is just being able to be super sensitive to where we are, because these environments are incredibly fragile and we don't want to do anything to disturb that balance in nature.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, back to Antarctica, I don't want to spend the whole time in Antarctica, because I know you guys go other places in the Arctic as well, and you have these visions of exploring different parts of the world. But gee, when was your first time down in Antarctica? Do you remember the year, and what was your first impression? What kept you going back?
That's a really good question. I was out of work. This is back in the mid-90s, and I had was doing some freelance as a chef, which is my main career, pre-beard anyway. And went to work one day, and one of the other staff at work turned up to say her friend had just come back from wintering in the Antarctic, and he was coming around for dinner, and did I want to chat to him about potentially working as a chef. And I'd not, my academic background is in science, and I had, I knew the Antarctic existed, but I'd never considered working there because it just seemed so improbable. And I think that's the case for lots of guests as well. They think, how on earth can I get to this place? Anyway, so long and short of it, he pestered me, and until I went for an interview, and it turned out there were no other interviewees, and the medic was there, and it was a stitch-up. So I got the job, flew into Antarctica via the Falklands, which is a very special place. Landed on a really wet, grizzly day. It was horrible on this amazing island, way south west of the peninsula, called Adelaide Island, and it was horrific. And I thought, what the hell have I done? It was just like, I'm going to be here for months. And then anyway, got my induction sorted out. The next day I was in the kitchen and looking out on this amazing view of 8,000-foot mountains and huge glaciers, and a group of Adelie penguins ran up to the base, and I was immediately hooked. And something, like 25 years later, I never get bored of it at all. And I think all of us who work as guides find that, people frequently ask us, what makes it exciting? Why do you keep coming back? Why do you travel over the Drake's Passage, every 10 or 12 days? And actually, it's the penguins are different every time. The guest reactions are different every time. And it's just a delight to see how thrilled people are to be there. For example, we might have had a really rough Drake's Passage, and we get to somewhere like Nico Harbour, which is one of the most beautiful places on the peninsula, and open the curtain in the morning. And if it's a dingle day with blue sky and no wind, it's so exciting because that people are going to be so overwhelmed by it. Yeah, half of them will have been up all night, just taking in this amazing scenery. So yeah, I've had something like 3,500 nights actually on the continent, sleeping in tents and research stations, and I would do it all again if someone will let me, please.
Yeah, exactly. And Phil, how about you? What was your first experience like, and what brought you there?
Don't tell me about falling down in pants, please.
You want to hear that one?
You should tell him. It's a funny one.
So all right, I'll tell him. The first time I was down in Antarctica was in 2014, And I was invited by a friend of mine who I worked with in Alaska, and she needed an assistant kayak guide to come down and work with her in a kayak program. And it took me all of 10 seconds to decide, I'll go to Antarctica with you. That sounds amazing. I had heard of other guides doing it, and I was just, I thought that was so far beyond what, anyone would ever offer me or what I was capable of. And I went down uh, and had just come up on the ship as it was going through this mid-season refit, in through kind of a bit of a surprise. And our expedition leader at the time, Jonathan, um, hucked my luggage on the boat, on the Zodiac, and we zoomed off on a windy day in Ushuaia, and I was covered in spray. And he was like, "Hey, Phil," as I arrived on the ship, "let me show you around." And I said, "Well, like, I think I want to get changed first, and put my bag away and stuff." And he led me to my cabin on the ship, and and I knock on the door, and my cabin mate was inside, and he says, "Hold on, I've just got my pants on." And I was like, "Okay, great." So I open the door, and there's Gerard with his beard in just his underwear. And the look of like shock and surprise on his face. Just, whoa. It was amazing. But that's the first time I met Gerard, and he was the man falling over in pants. And of course, I had no idea that in England, pants is underwear. In the States.
Best friends for life, right there.
Yeah, that was it. That's how it all started. Yeah, the fateful moment for sure. But we crossed the Drake just a day later, and I remember meeting the guests and being really excited to go down with them, and we had a bit of a rough Drake, and we got to the South Shetland Islands, is pretty much the tier of land before you get to the Western Antarctic Peninsula, the continent itself, and it was a really foggy time at the South Shetlands. But as we sailed through the Bransfield Strait and started approaching the continent, the clouds parted, just like, the sun started shining through, big like rays coming down, and highlighted the continent itself. And you could see the mountains, and it just became this beautiful blue sky day. And I remember standing on deck, because our expedition leader had called us all out. It was like, "Hey, this is gorgeous. Come outside and see." And there's just this one moment where we saw a humpback rise up for the first time, and we saw it come up right next to this iceberg filled with penguins. And I was just like, "Is this Antarctica?
Right.
Am I here now? Is this it? Is this what it's always going to be like?" And the answer is, yeah. It's always amazing. It's always just jaw-dropping and stunning. Um, and that's why we keep going down. It's just this kind of place. It's like going to church, and you go and you feel this connection that's just beyond yourself in areas like that. And you can experience that in places like Antarctica, or you get that in Svalbard, or fjords with big mountains in different places in the world, or even here in California, you can kind of get that too. Just depends on where you are. But I think the big thing for me is the people. We work with such an amazing group of people day in and day out, and the guests themselves. I mean, you don't arrive in a place like Antarctica by accident.
Right.
You have to be the kind of person that wants to go there. And we've been so lucky, I think, to find ourselves in these situations where we keep coming into contact with amazing people over and over, and it's inspiring.
No,
The place and the people you surround yourself with. It's just
and I think that's one of the things that we found so fascinating too on the ship is the guests. I mean, we had so much fun with these people we just met, but we had so much in common with them, and they were just good people who love nature. And then you guys, these experts who obviously love nature, and it was just a really good experience. So, what have you noticed being the biggest change to both of the polar regions since you started traveling there?
So if I can take the first one, I think we notice a lot of small changes. Nothing happens very fast, right? But you take take note of those changes in the context of what's happening on a bigger scale. I think we just broke some temperature records down in Antarctica in 2019, the hottest day on record.
That was on
happened
my
that
trip.
day.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah,
hottest day in
that was that
Antarctica's
trip.
history. And I just stood there on the shoreline in shorts and a t-shirt. Like, how is this possible?
That's right. That's right. You know, over the years, we've noticed that there's more rainfall happening, not just in more northerly locations, but in places that are further south and haven't traditionally, had rain. You know, you talk to guides that have been around a lot longer than I have, and they just look around baffled because it's raining in a place like, Nico Harbor, and that's actually bad news because penguin chicks with their fluff and their down, they're not made for rain, they're made for snow, and rain soaks them, and it's just it's interesting because you have these seasonal changes. Some years you have, it's really cold, and some years it's really warm, and you can go through these modulations between, different sorts of weather. The overall trend is that things are getting warmer, and we see a lot of effects because of it. But say in Svalbard, some years we have a lot of ice, and it's really hard to get around, and some years the ice is just gone. We have to travel for a day and a half to get up to the pack ice, where in other years we gotta go, 4 or 6 hours, and now we're at like a thick ice edge where we can look for polar bears. So it's something where it's changing, and those changes are becoming more and more pronounced as we go on. We see penguin colonies moving around and moving further south because they have requisite, needs to be on fast ice where they find their food, and we're just going to keep seeing them, and you hear bigger news about certain glaciers in Antarctica, and that's something that we're only becoming more and more aware of as time goes on. Yeah.
And how about you, G?
Well, it's I echo what Phil has said, of course. We do see variations year to year. I think my overriding impression on the peninsula is that we get a lot more precipitation in shorter blasts. So we get a ton of snow at the time of year we wouldn't traditionally have expected lots of snow, and the penguins are struggling to find those rock nests that they build. I'm thinking of Danko a couple of years ago, where penguins were buried in snow. They couldn't, they were just sat waiting, and colonies fail. Equally, we have colonies of emperor penguins that, would normally be expected to fledge their chicks at the foot of the ice shelves on the fast ice that are breaking up earlier. So they're moving around and having to adapt quickly, behaviorally more than evolutionary, to new challenges. But I think also one thing I'd also really introduce is the fact that, 25 years ago when I first started in Antarctica, I literally had an A4 page of text I could send to one family member a month. That was my comms and that was by telex, because the fax machine was broken or didn't exist pre-email. And I think one thing that the real isolation from communication to the outside world offered you was really the immersive experience that you would maybe be on a ship. And let's face it, tourism's happened for 70 or 80 years. Chileans and Argentinians took people to the Antarctic way before the Second World War, albeit in very small amounts. Is the way that we have to communicate to the outside world what is happening in Antarctica. And certainly working on the research stations, as I did for a number of years, there was always a slightly sniffy attitude towards tourism and expedition vessels, and tourist companies or expedition companies, call them what you will, because scientists considered that the continent should just be for them, and that tourism would damage or impinge on the environment. And actually, I think it's really important that we do have that ability to communicate what's happening on the continent. We see those changes, be it over a 5 or 10 or 20 year period. We see colonies moving, we see more melt, less snow cover, we see changes in the degree of the weather. And I think that's a message that by taking people to the Antarctic, we can enable communication about what's happening there, and really the fragility of that, massive place that would seem to be, completely immune to climate change. And actually, the Antarctic, particularly the peninsula and the subantarctic, is experiencing enormous change. And by taking people there in an environmentally sensitive way, as much as we can spread that message that actually we need to change our behavior as humans.
I'd like to just fully agree with you, Gerard. There's a really important aspect of taking tourists down to the Antarctic. What we're hoping that we do effectively is creating ambassadors for these regions. Yes, we're getting people that want to go to Antarctica. They want to find out more about what's going on because they've heard news here and there about things like melt and all of these other factors, and they say, oh, we have to get there before it all melts away. It's amazing how many times I hear that. And the fact is, Antarctica is not gonna melt entirely, and if it did, it'd be really bad because sea levels.
Right. Right.
But the reality is that these ecosystems are changing. Scientists are down in Antarctica doing really fascinating work, but there has always been this disconnect between science and the public. How do you communicate effectively the science that's happening? And I think one of the best things that we can do as guides is act as these facilitators and moderators, and say, hey, this is some really good science. This is what's happening right now. They're finding out these things, and you can say that stuff, and then you can point out the window or point into the water from your Zodiac or your kayak and say, this is what we're talking about. And when you do that, you create these ambassadors, people that can go there, see it, touch it, feel it, smell it, and then go back and be these champions for a changing ecosystem. And that's just as important as anything, because it's really people that give power to policy. And if we can promote policy that protects these environments, that's
right.
one of the biggest things we can do.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I started this podcast. Actually, was the I've been these places. I've met people like yourselves, and I want to just become an ambassador to these places. I have a personal connection now with them, just like all your guests will have. They've been there, they've seen it with their own eyes, they've learned from the experts, and then they can bring it home and share it with their friends and family, put it on Instagram, put it on Facebook, and tell their story and be just maybe not as expert information as what you guys can provide, but they can provide some sort of information and spread the word. And the more we spread the word on these places, whether it's saving them or just what's happening there, it doesn't necessarily have to be we'd love to save the Arctic and we'd love to save all the animals in the world, but educating people on what's happening on a cultural level in places like Morocco, Central Africa, wherever you end up going, that there's just to be an ambassador to the world. And I think what you guys are doing is incredibly important. So
thanks.
Yeah.
And that's what we hope to do too. And I think giving people the time to go and see that, not rushing people through anything, and letting people come to their own decision with regard to that is incredibly important. Giving people the space and time to do that is one of the most powerful things you can do in these places. And we were talking about it before we started, that one of my favorite things to do in the Antarctic as a kayak guide is not to shuffle people down a coastline and back. It's giving people the space to do it. And I do something called the Zen 10, where we find an open space in the ice, and I just say to people, hey, take 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and just sit and let this experience come to you. And that's one of my favorite things, one of the most rewarding things I think I do as a guide, is just tell people, hey, slow down, right, and take it in.
Yeah, go ahead, G.
No, I'd echo what Phil said. I think one thing that I enjoy as a guide, I'm often on land because I'm the historian and the botanist, or a rifle guard in Svalbard and Greenland. And I like to get up every day and think, what is unique about where we are today? And yes, in the Antarctic, we see a lot of penguin colonies, but each place is different. And it's not just about the mass. Sometimes it's overwhelming, and it can be, for a lot of people, it can be quite spiritual. A lot of our guests will have saved up for the trip of their lifetime.
Yeah.
And so for me, working with the guests as I do, it's important for me to try to get under their skin, understand why they're there, and say, when you come on land today, you'll see one thing that you will not see anywhere else in the world. And that might be somewhere at Danko Island. And early in the season, there's a little hovel in a rock above the landing, and the sheathbills, little white birds with gnarly faces, are waiting for the snow to melt because they want to get into that crevice, because that's where they nest every year. And that's such a small detail. And everyone wants to rush up and see the penguins. That's great. Love penguins. Sure. But something like, just understanding the places we go to the level that we do, which is, very fortunate to have been to these places numbers of times, is pointing out to someone just to stop and appreciate the difference between each place, the thing that they will never see anywhere else, and just to give them that little, just look at that over there. That only happens here. And it's like, ping, wow, that's amazing. It's not just like, just stay away from, we could be penguin police. We could just say to people, stay away from the penguins, don't tread on the moss, and go back to the ship and eat lunch. But right. That's not why either of us are into it. It's much more important than that for us, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like your guys' experience that you're going to provide to your guests will be unmatched. I think both of your attention to detail, both of you are artists, photographers, drawers, and Phil, you're a photographer, correct? And G, you do, is it only drawing or also painting?
I do a bit of painting, but it's mostly sketching.
Okay,
yeah.
Mostly sketching.
I do my illustrated charts and design postage stamps.
And so in both of those disciplines, you have an attention to detail. Otherwise, you wouldn't be very good at what you do. I think you're applying some of those parts of your own life into the experience that you're going to provide your guests, instead of just saying, go on land, there's penguins, enjoy. They'll get so much more out of looking at the little things, taking time. Because if they wanted to be in a rush, then they wouldn't have come on these sort of trips. They would have just stayed home in the hustle and bustle of their lives, been, done the 9 to 5, work with the kids, repeat over and over again. And I think what people are really going to enjoy the most about your trips, not only these incredible locations, but the slowdown and the attention to detail, whether it's customer service or pointing out a particular plant that they won't see anywhere else in the world, and then explaining to them maybe its life cycle or something interesting that they can write down in their journal or just take home with them. I think people are really going to fall in love with that sort of travel.
Definitely. And
let's hope so.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's
fingers crossed.
Definitely the hope is to create these life-changing experiences for people, right?
Yeah.
And
So
just to,
you guys started launching this just this past year, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
What have you done during the pandemic to prepare yourselves to hit the ground running once we can all start traveling again?
Well, that's a really great question, because that answer continually changes.
Sure.
We started with really high hopes in January of 2020, and we all know what happened 2 months after. It was something where we really had to reevaluate our commitment to the project. Gerard and I had several meetings over the last year where we're saying, yes, we really believe in this idea and we want to move forward, because times were really difficult, and it's not just that the project had to be delayed by a year, but we were also out of work for a year, which has really kind of tested our mettle, in our financial commitment to the business idea itself. And we had trips set up for 2021 and 2020 or 2021 this summer. I mean, we'd be going on trips right about now, wouldn't we, Gerard?
Yeah, we would. June, we had our first Svalbard trip.
And May of this year as well.
Yeah. Oh yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I should be there next week.
Yeah,
I may still go. The house is
It-
empty.
and you know, we have worked with a really incredible friend and guide, Lynn, to plan trips in South Africa, and we're looking at those trips right now and saying, how are these locations changing due to the pandemic? We are constantly reevaluating and looking at news and places like Norway and Morocco and Africa in general, and we've had to move the goalposts, so to speak, you know, and we've shifted trips and worked with some really wonderful suppliers and boats that are completely understanding because they're in the same situation, and everyone thankfully has treated us well, and we hope to treat them well back, and what we're doing is moving our trips to 2022. Our inaugural season will happen in about a year, and we'll start off with that Morocco trip that Gerard should be going on in a week. But you know, with that, we're approaching everything with caution and making sure that we know what we're getting ourselves into, looking at COVID policies and how things might change, and making sure you know, things like insurance reflect the new reality, right? And that's been a journey, for sure. And I couldn't have done it without you know, Gerard standing right there next to me, and I hope he can say the same in reverse, because I think we've really been supports for each other through this whole thing. And if I were just doing this on my own, I don't know if I would have made it this far.
I just I think my overwhelming feeling about this is that also I wouldn't be here without Phil, in terms of just my own life, really, but also in terms of where we are with the company. You know, we've had our moments, you know, the past year and 2 months, you know, the Antarctic season shutting down, well, albeit just 1 week early, but then the Arctic season maybe going ahead, then cancelled. It's been a constant battle to just keep ourselves moving forward. And it's not always been easy at all. I think the one thing that, over and above, you know, our friendship, which is more important than our business relationship by a long way, but you know, we've kept going in a pretty straight direction. And I think the one, you know, the important thing over and above our friendship and the business relationship is that we have this great network of friends and guides and guests that we have maintained contact with over the year. And lots of our friends who are guides have gone through very difficult times themselves. You know, many have had to leave the industry to get full-time jobs. You know, I've got a wonderful expedition leader friend who's now a landscape gardener, in fact, 2, another one that's a carpenter. And we are all doing what we can just to keep things going. But the overriding direction is, for me certainly, and Phil, is ATE, and is getting these trips going. And all the communications we have with our potential guests, you know, we have this amazing group mailing list of wonderful people that want to travel with us, is the support we've had from them. The messages that we are just ready to travel with you. We're packed. We're ready. Tell us when, you know. And that's been actually quite emotional at times, because you know, I get messages from people saying, okay, I'm ready to book this, want to book this, just tell us when you're ready to go. And the logistics of organizing the business, thankfully, mostly took place pre-COVID in terms of the legal setup of the company. But then, you know, banking and insurance, that's changing week by week. Sometimes it feels, but we're getting there. Yeah, very excited about launching our first trips next year. That's going to be,
well, your first guests
wonderful.
are definitely going to be bombarded with attention and detail. You've had all this time now to plan with COVID that, you know, I feel like the first 2 or 3 trips, you're going to have all this information and time to research these few trips that you're just going to blast them, and they're going to absolutely love it and sign back up.
They better watch out.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Yeah, it's just going to be a fountain of information. Yeah.
Where do you see your company growing within 5 to 10 years? Like, what are your visions to expand? Are there, or you want to keep it small? Do you want it to, have you thought much of that, where you want to grow to?
I think we've really honed down at honed down what we want to be in terms of the spirit of the company.
Sure.
We want to be guest focused, running these really intimate trips, exclusive experience to amazing places. And like Gerard has alluded to, we know this amazing community of guides, and we truly believe that we can integrate, that we have all the pieces to put together an amazing company that offers trips, not just in the places that we've talked about on this podcast, but all over the world,
Yeah.
places that aren't even on our radar yet. And yes, I think we do want to offer trips to, amazing spots around the globe. And I think we're going to be facilitated by close friends and guides that we've come into contact with, around the world on our journeys and through our work. So in a sense, yes, we want to keep it small. We want to have this small circle of people that we rely upon, and we want to keep our group small. But I think our interests in the globe are pretty expansive.
Sure.
We want to go everywhere. And if someone were to come and approach us and say, hey, we want to run a trip here, we want to do it with you guys, then we would take that and say, okay, let's go. and that's honestly one of the most intriguing and engaging parts of doing this is just dreaming. You can dream of all these wonderful places, and when I do that, sometimes I'll stay up all night and draw up itineraries and get really excited about things. And Gerard, because he's in the UK and I'm in California right now, he'll wake up to just a stream of messages, which must just seem like babble, really. But
Often.
but I get really excited about this stuff, and that's one of the most, I think, encouraging things about this, is that I really am fulfilled by creating that experience for people, and I know Gerard is as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think one of the fun things is, we talking to our guests and our friends who are guides, is saying, okay, if you could run a trip, where would you run a trip to? Would it be, Northwest Falklands, out to the Jason Islands? Do we have a contact in the Falklands that can help us find a ship to do that? And yes, thankfully we think we do. Do you want to go to Baffin Island, Devon Island on a ski hauling trip, in places that no one ever goes to, for a couple of weeks next year, the year after? And yeah, we've got a guide that wants to help us do that. So it's enabling. I think one thing that one word I would use to describe the fun of our business is enabling people to have the most amazing experiences they can, and putting together groups of people and incredible guides. And yeah, obviously, we have to arrange all of that, and it has to come through our booking system and the legal side of it. But actually, the fun thing is actually seeing people, the excitement when people start to talk to us about trips is, we know that they're going to have a great time because we've put them together, we've matched them to the right trip. And by the way, if you want us to organize a trip for you anywhere in the world, we're more than happy to find the guide to do it.
I fully plan on that, and I'm serious about that. So
Absolutely.
Where can people like myself find you guys? What is your website where they can go and explore and learn more about you and what you're going to be offering?
So our website is arcticternexpeditions.com. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's our web address, and you can find all of our information right there. It's what we have up right now is tour pages, where we plan to go in the next 2 years, and I'm building a website, and that's going to expand. I'm actually working on fleshing a lot of that stuff out right now and adding more elements to it, and it's one of those things that's going to just keep on growing. What we have right now is a section where you can learn more about Gerard and I, and there's a contact page, and if anyone has any questions about what we can do or what we can offer you, or even if you just want advice about a place, we're more than excited to engage with you there. We're also on Instagram, Arctic Tern Expeditions. You can find us on Facebook there, and now on this podcast. So that's exciting.
Excellent. And YouTube.
Yeah.
Here we go.
It's really exciting. And I think I'll just add to that is that we do have a contact form on the website. So you can contact us. We can put you on our mailing list. We can then prioritize you to places that you tell us you want to travel to, so that we can better hone down. Because it's really important for us to identify the people in our contact list that want to go to specific places, so that we hone our development of the trips to these places. But then we'd like to tempt people to come to other exciting spots too. So the development of trips is something that isn't quick, but it's really important for us to get that right and to match people to the right trips. So yeah, get in touch, tell us what you want, and we'll be in touch. We're very good at that.
That's excellent. Well, I'm so excited for you guys. I
Thank you.
respect you both, and I know that you're going to do just amazing things for the travel industry. I know that what you're going to provide as a service, an education, a life-changing experience, and you're going to have some serious repeat customers, because I don't know any other travel companies that will be offering this sort of attention to detail, and through your own passion of these places and desire to learn. Yeah, it's going to be great. So I wish you the best. I absolutely think it's going to be really fun to watch you guys grow. And I want both to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me on this podcast and the YouTube channel, and look forward to catching up with you guys further down the road.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
And good luck with the podcast as well. And we'll see you on the water somewhere soon.
I hope so, guys.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're doing here, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us here at the Art of Actual Change. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I will do my best each week to try to bring you new, inspirational, motivating people who are doing work around the globe to make a big difference. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like down below and subscribe. And again, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining me.